Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another video, and this time around I have another interesting interview for you, namely somebody who came all the way from India to study industrial design here and who turned their graduation project into an actual company. So, I'll let him introduce himself.
My name is Venkatesh SDC Chandrasekhar. So I've been living in the Netherlands for the past 7 years now, almost 7 years. Before you know it, time really flies. I mean, I came here, I think in 2011, together with you. We had our classes in industrial design, in the specialization of integrated product design. So I did my bachelor's in mechanical engineering and master's in industrial design, and now I have my own startup for about 4 years now, so I don't know if I can call it a startup anymore.
You did study industrial design here with me, but then before that, what and where did you study it?
I did mechanical engineering in bachelor's, so in India I was where I studied. They called it BE. It was a 4-year class, and I liked the hybrid of being a mechanical engineer and a industrial designer, and I had a bit of a culture shock as a designer when I started my industrial design.
But before that, you never studied the design before
right.
that,
so
right?
I did mechanical engineering, pure mechanical engineering,
yeah.
Structural bolts, what is the forces on screws and stuff, like real proper forces and mechanical engineering. And then I worked for a year for an automobile company in India. And then I realized I wanted to do something broader and climb up the value chain a bit, so be a bit more broader than someone who's just designing screws. Well, actually, I even worked for a company which designs and manufactures screws with powder metallurgy. And then I realized, okay, let's change the career and move towards, a bit more abstract, a bit more higher up in the value chain. So wanted to actually make the products instead of just doing the last parts and being a last part designer. So I figured, okay, apply to a few universities, and I got into a couple of them, one in Sweden, KTH, and the other one is TU Delft. I saw a lot of positive reviews for TU Delft, and I started my study here based on hearing all these things. I had some issues in the portfolio in the beginning because they wanted me to make a better portfolio. It was mainly an engineering portfolio, so and they also recommended that I should do an internship at a design company for a few months before starting, which I did. Very good advice, I must say. But even with all that, I had a culture shock in the first semester. And as you know, that I'm not the best drawer out there, at least in the first year. And so I was wondering, what am I doing here? Spending, thousands of dollars, a lot of money, and then spending my hours sketching away. My dad is a zoologist, and he used to joke like, he loves sketching a lot actually, but more like insects and make cross-sections of plants and stuff. He was like, yeah, I loved sketching so much that I got bad grades in the other things. And he said, don't be the guy who's just sketching away his life. And I was like, oh my God, he knows what he's talking about. So I was a bit, wondering, what am I doing here? And then later on, I realized industrial design has a wide gamut of fields that you can get into. You can either choose to be this fluffy front-end designer, just coming up with creative ideas, sketching things, or you can also be someone who is really into coming up with new ideas, coming up with fits for technologies which exist already, so that you can bridge the technology and the user, blending the product market fit, as you speak. So there's a lot of possibilities out there.
So how much did it influence your design capabilities, learning capabilities, that you weren't necessarily a good drawer, or you weren't focusing only on drawing? How much did that affect you?
So in the first semester, I was really bad in the drawing classes. And then I forced myself to get into drawing, not because I wanted to, not because I had to, but because, I wanted to see if I could. And I took these watercoloring classes with you. And that actually improved my drawing a lot. It's just a matter of practice, I mean, I went from zero, because I did zero drawing before I came here to the university. And then I went to, let's say, a mediocre level of sketching and painting by first year. So I pushed it because I wanted to, not because I had to. But it didn't affect me so much that I could draw or I couldn't draw, but it did help. In my current day, it helps me in expressing my thoughts clearer to people. So that is where industrial design sketching is helpful to me.
Then coming from mechanical engineering to industrial design, what did you see yourself becoming when you were still in your studies and finishing your master as an industrial designer? What did you think you would be when you're done with your studies?
Yeah, so let's split it into the semester.
Yeah,
so
sure.
we have 4 parts.
Yeah.
By the end of first semester, I had no idea what I wanted to be, because we had this advanced concept design,
yeah.
right? And that was a little bit connecting fluffy front end and actually producing a product for a market need. I didn't do very well in this class, but later on, the teacher, I didn't get very well along with her. It was interesting vindication, because fast forward 3 years later, I had to give a class to the teachers of industrial design, and she was one of the attendees about how entrepreneurship can be taught to students. She was like, "Ven, it's you! Wow!" I was like, "Yeah, you know,
nice.
That's how life turns around." But anyway, so at that phase, I was a bit lost. And then the second semester, I was even applying for some internships and stuff, but I didn't really know what I wanted to do. So I even went to interviews where they said, "Are you a designer or are you an engineer?" So I wasn't at a place where I could say, "Well, I'm actually both." So in the second semester, we had a bit more, I don't remember exactly, it was another type of...
I think advanced embodiment design.
Right, yeah. So that is when I actually understood that I have tons of creative ideas, but not fluffy front-end creative ideas, but more like you can design this structure in a different way, which a standard mechanical engineer wouldn't think, because they would think more linear. But as a designer, who you can see in multiple dimensions, multiple planes, you can bring in a lot of types of ideas and make it into something. So I could bring more creative ideas, but more in a concrete engineering sense. So I figured that is where I have to be in. And then fast forward another 6 months, I did this jump class, which was very fuzzy front end, but then I was focused more on the engineering aspects of it. So I cemented more myself as, I would say, 60% of an engineer, researcher, 40% as a designer. So I think designing is a mental way of thinking. It's not just drawing all the time.
Mm-hmm.
And then once I finished my jump course in the final semester, I came up with this idea of Inkless Printing, which is the company which I have right now. So again, that is the crux of what I became, because I can combine creative ideas because of the industrial design way of thinking and the concrete engineering aspects which my mechanical engineering background has taught me. So I think that is the crux of the person I am right now. So combining creative ideas with concrete mechanical engineering or engineering science backgrounds. So
okay, that's very good. So I had talks with some other people, also from Delft, who went down the entrepreneurial line. And I was also curious, is it industrial design that makes people entrepreneurial, or does it attract people who have a tendency to be entrepreneurial?
It's quite a good question. I also wondered about it myself. I wasn't an entrepreneur before I came here at all. I think it's the university which triggered me. And by all means, yes, I think industrial design as well. So I think a majority of entrepreneurs from TU Delft, or a lot of them in this building, are either from aeronautical for some reason and industrial design. So I think there is an attraction for industrial designers to get into entrepreneurship, especially because in TU Delft you have these 3 ranges of industrial design which you can do. So you have the strategic, the front end, or the more strategic side, or design for interaction, and more industrial product design. So you have the whole gamut of covering from coming up with ideas, finding the market, and also actually producing the product. So industrial designers are exposed to a wider area of the market, a wider segment of the value chain of the market. So they are like, wait a minute, I can actually come up with an idea and find a market for it and actually produce it myself. So it's liberating to see that you can actually do this whole thing. So I think the industrial designer in me for sure attracted me towards entrepreneurship. And the university part, so TU Delft has a very good collaboration with this building, which is called Delft, and they have a student version as well. So they have a good collaboration with this building. So me and my flatmate Vicky, who was also our classmate, we went to entrepreneurial events here. Like they do like startup boot camps. So
maybe just also lay out quickly what Yes Delft is and what
Sure.
it does.
So Yes Delft is an incubator. I think there's like 100 plus companies here, a lot of startups. I think majority of them are from TU Delft. Of course, there are companies which are out of TU Delft, which are also here. Basically, they give you space. Of course, you have to pay rental for, but they give you the space where a lot of other entrepreneurs are also there. You can get free coaching from other entrepreneurs who have been in the industry for a long time. But more importantly, you can speak to your co-entrepreneurs who are also in the same struggle as you are. And you get to share ideas and basically helps by having a drink with them and having a chat with them. Like, hey, I have this problem. What do you think? I have this problem with my patent attorney. What do you think is a better one? Or how do you deal with it, for example? So it's a crisscross of ideas of different people working on different new innovations.
All right, thank you very much. So now that you are an entrepreneur, you're running your own company, how much of an industrial designer are you still? Or how much industrial design do you still do?
Right. So overall, probably like 10%, 10-20%. But that's on average over time. But if you would, I can actually put on my industrial design hat whenever I want to. So there are times I do much more, like 50-60% of design work. When I do, for example, creative ideas, coming up with creative ideas. Because industrial design is not just about sketching, as we just discussed. It's also about idea generation, for example. It helps you structure your thoughts in a nice way. And by structuring your thoughts and by making nice mind maps, it helps you see where are the parts where you haven't explored them. And then you can dive into those areas. So it's a way of thinking, the cliched word design thinking.
Yeah.
Sort of, it actually is true. So it helps you come up with new ways of approaching a problem. So in that way, but also, for example, when I make reports, I can see that a researcher from, for example, a physics background has trouble connecting what his ideas are to someone who is not from a physics background, to a layman. So they are in their own way of thinking. So for them, it's hard to translate to another dimension of a layman. So as a designer, I can see both sides, and I can see how a real researcher thinks. And when the real researcher is speaking, and to a layman, you can see that they are not connecting at all. So there are gaps in the way they speak. So as a designer, I can understand how different people are and speak in that way. So it's a matter of strategic talking to people. That's also a bit of a design thing.
Okay, that sort of leads me into a question that I like to ask people is, what is the most important thing or tool that you took away from your industrial design studies?
So I would say the most important thing is creativity and idea generation. It's not a specific tool per se, but it's a way of coming up with new ideas. So if you see around you in the world, there are tons of new things, but there are infinite combinations possible. Like you take something, for example, in my startup, we combine lasers and printing. So of course it exists, but in the manner that we put in and make ink obsolete, it doesn't exist. So in a way, industrial design helps me bring multiple things together and make it into something that's, I think, quite beautiful, because it didn't exist before. So they were independent entities, and now you can combine them into a new thing. So it's a way of thinking for me, mainly, what industrial design brings me.
Just jumping a little bit back to your education, so maybe can you tell me if you noticed or what the difference is in education in India and here at the TU Delft, for example?
So I think, as you say, I didn't study design, of course, but based on comparison to engineering and design, I think in TU Delft it's much more applied. So the connection to the industry is much more clearer compared to the study which I did back home. The university which I studied back in India had relatively more connections to the industry compared to a usual Indian university, but even then it was still lacking. So there is a chance that you produce engineers, you produce graduates who are not in tune with what the industry needs. But I think TU Delft does a wonderful job there. So they produce engineers. A lot of our teachers are from the industry as well. So it helps to fine-tune the teaching methodology, the contents, so that it's much more useful to the industry. I think the bridge is smaller to what is out there in the academia and the real world.
Did you feel this already back in India when you finished your bachelor's? I'm just curious why you decided to continue your studies abroad, and why not look for an ID program within India?
Right. So the general consensus among Indians is that the quality of education can be better abroad.
Mm-hmm.
So India has some amazing universities, but considering the population, is relatively hard to get into.
Mm-hmm.
These are the creme de la creme of Indian universities. Not that I applied and I failed, but I didn't apply. But in another way, the universities which are here, it's not just about the smartness that you need to get in here. It's about the way you think. It broadens your view of the world. So I think exposure is one of the reasons why I decided to go abroad than staying in India. And I think that's an incredibly good decision looking back, because I wouldn't have been exposed to all the things which I have now. Not because it is India, but it's just because your mind broadens when you go abroad and you do new things.
Yeah.
So
good. You also mentioned culture shock several times in the beginning. What was the culture shock for you, like from a strictly cultural point of view, but
mm-hmm.
also from a little bit maybe educational point of view?
Sure. From so starting with non-academic culture shock, people were much more freer here. I come from a relatively conservative education system in my university. Again, everything I say, India is huge, so it's pertinent to the area where I'm from, the university.
We're not generalizing.
Exactly. People often tend to do that.
Yeah.
But so, with that as a disclaimer, so we have we have to wear sometimes uniforms. So there is much less freedom and creativity, and there is much more uniformity. Like you have to wear proper shirts, shoes when you go to school. But here, everything is free. Like the first semester when I was studying here, people were just drinking and eating in the lectures, and for me that's, at least as an Indian, would be considered super impolite, and the teachers would also not like that. But here no one cares. So it's a much more relaxed society in general, and you can call your teachers on a first name basis. But that's pretty cool. Well, I'm actually mixing both academic and
it's okay. It's okay.
Sure. And also from a cultural standpoint, I think people are much more liberated. You can just do whatever you want. Maybe it's because we live in a student city here, but I think it applies to the whole of the Netherlands. You can drink, dance till, forever in the morning, and you bond on another level. While in India, if you do that as a student, again, pertinent to my university, you're considered as someone who's not going to go far in life. With here, you can go far in life, and you can still party, so it doesn't have to be two exclusive things. That is pretty cool, I think, from a cultural point of view.
Right. Well, thank you for that. Let's go a little bit into what you're doing now. Can you tell us more about the company that you started and the product that you're doing there?
So the company is called Tucano. Toner Cartridge No More is an abbreviation. What we do, the technology is called Inkless, and Inkless is a technology which was developed by me during my master's thesis together with professors of TU Delft. It's basically a technology which enables you to print on anything paper-based, like normal paper, cartons, without using ink. So you don't have to use these unsustainable, expensive inks anymore, and you basically can print without using inks or special coatings. So here is one of the prints, which I made earlier today. So here, basically, you see an Inkless logo, which is printed on a standard carton board. The way it is printed is basically there is a high power laser which comes and hits the paper, and it basically burns the paper, and it gives you the carbonized print. So what you see as a print is basically carbon black, which is produced as a result of the process. So this technology was quite revolutionary at that time. I think it still is. We were interviewed a lot on media. We were on a lot of news channels out there, including Euronews, DW News, etc. We were also once on Discovery in Canada, so it's quite interesting. So it has been out there.
Okay, and your role in the company right now is as CEO or?
Right, I am a CTO of the company, so my co-founder Arnaud is the CEO, and he is the one who is responsible for business operations and for speaking to customers, the more commercial side of things, and I do more the technical side of things. But of course, we discuss everything together when it comes to both technology and for the product, because we basically have to work together as a team. I do a lot of research in the company, so again, this is quite a shift from being a designer, but as I said, being a designer doesn't have to constrain you in any way. It only broadens you up. So I do a lot of research, trying out different lasers. Can I go for higher speed printing? What is the best way to apply this technology into a product? So these are the types of thinking which I do, apart from managing the team.
And doing a lot of research. I know that during our studies every semester we did a bit more and a bit more and more, and we had to substantiate what we did through research. Mm-hmm. Did you start developing a love or interest for research back then already, or is this something that came with this product that you started?
I think it's a combination of both. So when you're passionate about something, you want to go all the way and do as much research as possible. Because when you work for, potentially when you work for something or someone that you're not interested in, you don't care about validating to the extent that every single granule is validated. So, but when you have to do things on your own, or when you're passionate about doing something, then you want to make sure every single screw which goes in is going to work in the perfect way possible. So I think the amount of research which I put into this is signified by how much I like what I do, how much I'm passionate about what I do. And of course, the research methodologies I use comes a little bit from industrial design as well.
And then just jumping back one more time, so this was also a graduation project, right?
Yes, yeah.
And so you could choose either a company gave you a project or you came up with your own project. Mm-hmm. Obviously, in this case, you came up with your own project.
Right, yes.
What prompted you to do this? What gave you the inspiration? Why did you decide on this product?
Right, so I usually have a lot of ideas. I have probably like 50 ideas written in places, collected over time. And this was an idea which my dad always talks about, him having issues with the ink cartridges when he's trying to print something. And then out of serendipity, I was thinking, why don't we actually just carbonize and produce ink directly from the paper instead of applying a new layer of ink? And I thought, well, that can be actually quite cool. Interestingly, I made a few sketches as soon as I had the idea to start off, and that gets you into a creative mode of thinking. Then you realize it's not about how the printer is going to look, but it's rather about, is the technology going to work? I soon realized that, and then I started getting into more physics principles about lasers and interaction of paper and laser. Then I figured this is an idea which has a lot of potential impact in the industry, and it seems that it could work because it's important to do your first principles validation, and it seems that it could work. And then I also considered working for other companies for my graduation thesis. One of the companies which I did my internship for, Priva, which is a horticulture company in the Netherlands, offered me a role, but I preferred to do my own research, because sometimes working for your own thing can bring you more gratification than working on an idea for someone else. Not saying that you always have to work on your own thing. As long as you like what you're doing, it doesn't matter if you work for yourself or if you work for someone else. But this was a new experience for me to do something on my own. And having been marinated in Delft as a student, I figured, why not give entrepreneurship a shot? So
nice. And then, as a last question, a lot of people are interested in online tools, services, resources that they could use for industrial design. What would you say to somebody, let's say also from India, mm-hmm. who is interested in studying industrial design but doesn't have the resources at hand just now?
Sure. So I would say get some experience on your own, because education can only fine-tune what you already know. So it's good to know the world before deciding what you want to do as a part of your education and also as a part of your future career. So get some experience. If you think you can be a front-end designer, doing sketches. Start with an internship maybe, and then work for a few months. See if it is something that you would like to do. And if not, you save tons of money, because it is expensive. As discussed, it's about 15,000 or something per year for a non-EU citizen to study in the Netherlands. So before you spend 30,000 euros, so at least you know that you want to be in that industry. I know of people who start into something which is much more hardcore engineering. This is a real story. I don't want to say any names, but then they realize they want to do much more front-end design work, and then they realize they cannot actually switch so easily, and then they are stuck with their study. So know what you're getting into. If you cannot do it this year, if you cannot get in this year, and if you really want to get into this particular thing, don't just get into something else. Just don't settle, don't compromise. Wait for a bit longer. There's a couple of intakes per year, so find yourself a little bit first before you get into a chosen direction of study.
And then just to hammer it down a little bit more, based on your experience, because I bet there's a lot of young people out there who are studying more hardcore engineering and they want to do more.
Mm-hmm.
And following your path, what would you advise to those people?
I would say go for it, because you can very well combine any field of engineering with industrial design. I think it's extremely compatible. It's not a exclusive study at all. So I would say go for it.
That is some great advice. Well, thank you very much. This is the end of the interview. If you would like to plug anything about Tokano or Inkless Printing, feel free.
Check out inkless.ink. So that is our website if you're excited about Inkless Printing. And you can reach out to us through that.
Well, thank you very much, Venkatesh.
You're welcome. Yes.
Well, that was my interview with Venkatesh. I hope you enjoyed it and that you learned a lot from it. If you'd like to see more content like this, remember to subscribe. There will be more interviews and of course also sketching videos in the future. But that was the video for this week. See you folks next time. Bye bye.